All right. Welcome to this month's Ceph Developer Monthly, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. So, on today's agenda, we have a topic from Daria about implementing audit logs. Would you like to take that away?
Yep. Hi everyone. There this side from the Ceph team. So let me quickly get the tracker link for everybody. So we have this tracker ticket. So this basically came from the experience with a lot of customer clusters where, or even the upstream clusters where folks usually run the disaster recovery tools or commands in such a way that it can lead to the SFFS health in a very bad way. Um, so some sort of implementation like what we have in Linux, which is like a history, like it can fetch a list of commands that were previously executed, could be quite helpful in, identifying what might have went wrong, like having a quicker RCA, both maybe from the developer side and maybe from the support team as well. So we at FFS have been doing a lot of brainstorming about how can we do this, about trying to come up with design architecture, which we could probably put into action and start implementing this. So this basically is like there are three streams, from which we get the audit logs. So when I say audit logs, just consider the commands that can be via monitors, that can be via manager, or it could be some standalone script like CFFS channel tool or something. Um, the When it comes to the standalone tools, it's directly communicating with the daemon. In case of the channel tool, it's MTS. But when it comes to the monitor and MGR, there are a few of these FFS commands. Sorry if I am being a bit FFS specific, but I hardly have any knowledge about what other daemons command route via. So when it comes to CFFS, there are a set of commands that route via monitor, that route via manager. Um, so the idea is simple. That is to get a shared library, um, which would have the APIs that would be storing in a backend storage. Most probably, it would be libceph SQLite, which was developed by Patrick, which makes use of SQLite 3. Although not quite a distributed system thingy, but I think there are it's the way it communicates with Rados. It does the job. Not that bad. The only roadblock that we see right now is that what happens for the monitor logs, because the monitors cannot communicate with the Rados directly, because there are some feedback loops and we should not be running into that. Also, monitor is, I think, the only entity in Ceph cluster which sort of stores its logs in local disks, I guess. It's not on the Rados, right? Um, so that's one thing. So we thought of that, let us route this monitor logs via MGR. But the issue with MGR is that monitor managers can get down at times. Could be because of MDS, could be some other issues. So we've been thinking like, how could we be able to make sure that we persist every monitor command? Because One thing's for sure, that we cannot break rules, that we allow a direct communication between the monitor and Rados. So obviously it has to route via MGR, but if MGR is down, then we can think of some trade-offs. Um, we probably came up with some ideas where we thought of that, hey, let's just allow the monitor with the Paxos store to just grow out of bound and then issue some warnings to the users. But that obviously doesn't sound like a feasible approach. Um, so that's that, and this is it. Just in a nutshell, it's just implementing what we have in Linux, a history command in for every Ceph cluster command that we run, whether it's via the Ceph CLI or it's a standalone script that goes to underlying database. Um, and we would like to make sure that we processed all sort of commands. Um, yeah, that's it. Um, I have Venki and Mahesh as well. Um, if anyone of you would like to add something to this discussion, Venki, are you there? I hope I'm audible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Okay.
Um, Thanks for the intro, Daria.
Yeah. Oh, Patrick's there as well. Hi, Patrick.
Hello?
Yeah, so this nothing is finalized as of now, but there is huge interest, at least from the FS team on this. The reason is obviously, as Daria mentioned, when things break in a cluster, especially say a file system is broken and users come back for suggestions on fixing it, we generally have to go back and forth and ask for what all was done on the file system, what commands were run. And it's not like we don't trust our users, but sometimes what happens is it takes awful lot of time for all this communication to happen. And sometimes, all these tools have special flags and a bunch of arguments, which during these message exchanges could, it's easy to miss that. So the idea is to have all the commands that have been run, excuse me, persisted in a database, and and when the time comes to say to a file system to help our users to say prepare a file system, and we would like to know what all was done, we can have an interface via a manager project preferably, to fetch the list of say last commands that were run the last month, or last 20 commands. Maybe give us last all commands from the monitors or all commands from the manager and stuff like that. So once we have that dump, it's easy to kind of then infer what could have happened, which broke the file system, or in general which broke the cluster. So that's where all this is coming from. And the design itself is obviously under discussion. But what we felt was this audit logging mechanism is pretty general in Ceph, and we want to start off with Ceph FS, yes, but it seems to me like it's very much beneficial for the whole Ceph project in general, and we would like to gather you know opinions on from other components, what they feel about it, and if there is something that can be designed, from in all this design process, so that we don't have to change stuff a lot later. I do see like John has a question. Do you plan to expire entries from this logdb after a time? Yes, there will be retention policies, John. So we don't want to let all this database grow out of bounds. So we could have some basic retention policy, like trim all the logs, say which are over a month, and we can give some control to our users to to configure that, or maybe even something like, maybe if like the log is growing to some size or something, we can like start trimming aggressively. But yeah, some form of log trimming will happen based on some retention policy.
So did you guys consider using the existing end-to-end tracing that we added for the OSD and RGW? Because there's a system that does that already that doesn't need to be developed. We're using open telemetry infrastructure there, and it allows us to get traces that can span multiple daemons, which is a huge value in helping to debug the system. It is an external database and everything, so I don't see any specific value in trying to re-implement something that already exists.
All right.
So, like, do you have any
yes.
talks about this? Or maybe the implementation part can point us to?
So, in general, I can try to dig up some documentations. We didn't do the whole work, but there is end-to-end tracing that works between the RGW and the OSDs. I can send you the docs, and the main kind of, I think, decision would be to adopt the open telemetry. It's a set of libraries and SDKs and APIs that allows you to pass traces between daemons and kind of append to them, and eventually they also provide you a set of collectors and databases, and all that stuff is in there. So it could be something that would be more useful than trying to implement something that is specific to Ceph.
Yeah, I don't have much like knowledge about that stuff, Yuval, but so correct me if I'm wrong. So this feature, what you spoke about, is mostly like, if somebody does like an FS reset or runs any Ceph command, we need to log that command. And you're saying support for that kind of exists in some form in the Ceph project using the library that you're talking about?
Yes.
Or, okay.
I mean, for example, what we did with the RGW and OSD, whenever somebody is, putting an object or reading an object from our object store, we don't exactly log the record at that point, because we want the log record to include everything, including spanning multiple daemons. So we're accumulating data, we're sending that, everything exists there in the infrastructure. It's not something that we had to develop. We're sending that to the OSD, and the OSD takes this information and add more information. Eventually, at some point, they're logging the record. Logging the record is just sending that to a collector, and then the collector, or a set of collectors, they have a distributed architecture. They kind of funnel all the information into a database, and they have tags, and searchable by tags, and filtered to searchable according to time. Like all those problems kind of already addressed by the infrastructure there. We used to have some sort of end-to-end tracing also with the RBD, using some old technology that we never actually, got to work. But the same concept could be added there, and of course also with CephFS, I guess. I don't see any reason why it should be different than any other kind of end-to-end tracing that we're going to have in the system.
And that includes the monitor commands too.
Currently, it doesn't include the monitors. Currently, the only daemons that participate in this are the RGW and OSD. But as teams, I mean, I work for the RGW team. This is why I'm not going to add that to any other daemon. But if people find end-to-end tracing useful, then I would encourage them to use that in their product as well, or in their daemons as well.
All right, that's a fair point. Do you know if they're like, what's the overhead of all this in terms of performance or anything?
Yes, so we did quite a thorough investigation. So in order for the core team to allow this feature in, we had to run extensive performance testing for that. We put lots of effort into making sure that if tracing is not enabled, then it will have zero impact. If it is enabled, then, well, it's kind of depends how much you use it, right? So the more traces, the more information you pour into that, will have bigger performance impact. But the overhead of the infrastructure or of the SDK is pretty minimal. So, if you have to create a large string and put that in the log, it doesn't really matter what kind of mechanisms you use. The infrastructure itself, like the SDK itself, is using like co-located collectors, and it uses UDP to send to the collectors. So the overhead of sending the information is quite minimal. Later on, taking all the information and put that in the database could be costly, but this is not something that impacts directly what we're doing. We have the numbers. So in the PR where we added the end-to-end tracing, there is the information about the exact numbers. I don't remember them like off the top of my head, but I will send you the information.
All right.
So
I would also be interested in the resiliency of this. I mean, do
yeah.
we have like lags? Like if I send a log and does it like I expect it to be there, or is it like, it might not be there because it's buffered somewhere. So I'll be interested in all those, because last we want is like, switch to this, which is all fine. I mean, if it solves the purpose, yes, by all means. But yeah, if there are like, like gaps in which we lose commands, the functionality of logging commands, and so all that needs to be covered because we also need like a chronological event of those commands to be done. But if there are gaps, we need to see if that fits our use case. So
Yeah,
any more information would be helpful.
Yeah, this would be more. I mean, we have to make a decision eventually whether whether we trust this open telemetry infrastructure, because this is like the resiliency and everything is outside of scope of what we did. We're kind of saying, okay, we're going to adopt technology that is used elsewhere by many other projects, or we don't trust it. Like we can only trust code that we write. So this is kind of a fundamental decision that we need to make. Well, I would just say that I usually trust code that already running in production than code that I just wrote. But I mean, this is some investigation that we'll have to make. There could be issues. So there are no very strict guarantees for their architecture because their architecture is saying, we're going to use UDP because the collectors or the agents are collocated. So we assume there will be no loss of data there. But of course, this can happen. And then there is buffering that is happening there, and then there's a polling mechanism that pulls that out of them. But to actually understand how the whole thing kind of work, that would require further investigation. But again, this is a system that is running in production in scalable way. So, even if it has some kind of or some issues, we have to be sure that we know how to do that in a better way before we try to build our own.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, I also have the same question that John has in the chat window actually, because we are storing all these in some external place. So yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean we have good pointers. So do you have the link of the PR that adds this URL? or is it the link that Daria is linking in the chat?
Sorry again. Which link?
Daria linked the PR in the chat window. And
oh yeah. Yes, I think that's the main PR that added that the end-to-end tracing. I'll try to find where I have the perf tests, and I mean I'll try to compile all the information that I have about that.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if this was answered, but Casey wrote a question. If we want to use tracing for audit logging, wouldn't that require all tracing to be enabled all the time?
Well, if we need that for audit logging, we'll have to enable that all the time, but I'm not sure what do you mean by all tracing. The tracing enable and disable is controlled by config options. So I guess we can have fine-grained config options if we want to enable tracing only for CephFS and not for RGW, for example.
Okay, thanks. I guess a follow-up question is, do we have Ceph ADM or something that deploys this integration? Because I feel like it would be...
Yes. We have that for the simple deployment because we also have the option of kind of connecting to an existing open telemetry deployment. Then you can do that as well, and then we don't deploy it. Or if like the open telemetry deployment could be pretty complex, depending with the distributed system that you have, and if it's very complex, we don't cover all the different options in Ceph ADM. But if you just want something out of the box to work, then we have that in Ceph ADM.
And John asks, how can Ceph ADM commands be audited if it needs to deploy this first?
Currently, we didn't add anything to Ceph ADM. Like, we didn't add the actual tracing to Ceph ADM. If the Ceph ADM team would want to add that, then sure.
So yeah, this sounds like the chicken and egg problem, which I assume would apply to anything trying to store audit logs in Rados also, right?
I have one question regarding the storage. Like, I think you mentioned earlier that this is some external storage, right? So, like, what about the replication or about the durability of the logs? Like, where is it exactly maintained?
I think they have a couple of database options, and it's really up to how you configure the database where the logs are or the traces are. Though this is not the durability of database is not something we invented here in Ceph. It exists.
Okay.
Was there any other part, area that you needed feedback on that wasn't covered? That's a question to Daria. Or anybody else?
Well, I guess coming back to Daria's earlier question, skipping over the detail of what tools we use to build this, do other components have feedback regarding things they wish they could collect, especially from a cluster that's in trouble, but is currently difficult to do and has to be done in an ad hoc manner via support, either running certain scripts you have or whatever to collect the information you need, such that it would plug in nicely into this effort.
For RGW, it could be useful to keep a log of Rados GW admin commands that are run, which sounds similar to the uses that you guys want.
Also,
Sorry, as a follow-up question for Casey, would you find value in having like all the Rados at gateway admin commands that have been run for like the last 5 years, or like, I guess the question is something run like a year ago potentially related to the problems that may be occurring today? Or do you generally only care about things that have been done very recently?
Hard to say. Like zone group configuration changes could be relevant in the long term.
Okay.
I a follow-up or related question to that. Since we were talking about how long the history would be persisted, do you plan to make that configurable, like for that to be adjustable depending on how long the user wants something to be configured or persisted, or is that going to be a set amount?
I guess it would be made configurable. Like as Venki mentioned earlier, we'll have the retention policies in place that should just stream depending upon the configuration that user has set.
Okay.
Yeah, presumably some things would not be ever trimmed, at least not automatically. Like for CephFS file system, we would like to know what recovery commands have ever been run on the file system, and it would probably not make sense to ever delete that. If they're running recovery commands often enough that becomes a problem, they have other issues.
Just to answer your first question, Patrick, when I had at some point discussion with people from the core team regarding tracing, and one of the things that they were interested at were timestamps. They thought that could give them good insights as for faulty OSDs or servers. So they would like to see timestamps per kind of entities in the logs.
Sorry, I'm not understanding the point. What do you mean timestamps for entities in the logs?
Okay, so they wanted to understand the latencies, the different latencies in the system, and if they see that a specific OSD or something else, what kind of they wanted to have what kind of ways to filter by different things. If they see that some things in the system have high latencies, then that would give them indication about where the problem is. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not sure if the this audit log feature would be appropriate for making those kinds of conclusions. I primarily view this as a support, a cluster support tool, giving you access to important events that have occurred in the cluster over potentially a long period of time. And it, I was just talking about this earlier with Daria. I'm not sure if he discussed this earlier, but even things like collecting or having daemons automatically write perf dumps out to a dedicated audit log channel. And each channel would be a database, and each entity would have its own database that it writes perf dumps to, and you could have like an hour retention policy for those. And then during some kind of support event, you could pull all of those audit channels down when you're collecting debugging for the cluster, and you would have access to all of that information as a developer or a support engineer to try to diagnose what's wrong with the cluster. So like being able to actually query all the perf dumps for all of the OSDs or all the MDSs, all the RGWs, or any other type of information you would want to collect. And that could be something that could be configured potentially dynamically through a Ceph configuration. So again, I think the way to view this feature is not from diagnosing performance issues necessarily, although it could potentially be done that way, maybe after collecting a dump to diagnose a performance issue. But the primary use of the tool is to collect logging information that you would probably be asking support to collect for you in order to diagnose the issue, not to actively monitor the cluster.
okay.
Any more thoughts or feedback from anybody?
Just a question to you all. Like with the telemetry that you have in place, RGW, how do you fetch the commands, the logs, let's say?
Sorry, you're talking about the existing like the tracing mechanism that we have?
Yep.
The logs are in the database.
So is there any like a CLI command or tool just to like dump it into some JSON or anything like that?
Yeah, they have an API to fetch the records from the database. I think it also depends. Like they have different database options that could be used. I will, but mainly for basic testing, I'm using some simple option, and they have an API. I can share that.
Any other last comments, thoughts, opinions? All right. If not, thank you for presenting this. It's really interesting, and feel free to. You're always welcome to bring it back in future months if you've made some work on it and want further feedback. Since I understand this is like the proof of concept almost, or an initial draft. All right. Is there any other topics that anybody wanted to bring up that is not on the agenda, or any final comments about anything we've discussed today? All right. If not, thank you everybody for lots of good feedback today, and I'll see you all in the next month's